Hi, I'm Lisa Jones, and I'm a former certified public accountant for Pricewaterhouse, Ernst& Young, and I also have had a shared death experience which changed my life, and I'm really excited to share that with you. So on February 22nd, 2004, my husband passed away after a long illness. He had been 6 or 7 years, and he had lymphoma cancer, and he was actually 44 when he passed away. So the night that it happened, actually hospice had been called that day because up until then he didn't even believe he was really dying, but he was incoherent that morning, and I called his doctor, and so they said, let's send hospice over. And they actually evaluated him and said that it'll probably be at least 2 to 3 weeks before he passes. He's not looking imminent in any way. And I called his brother and best friend, and they came over, and it was the first time I really wasn't alone in the house with him at this point. We had 2 young children. They were 1 and 3 when he was diagnosed, and 8 and 10 when he died. So after hospice came, my kids ended up leaving the house that night. My son went to Ian's mother's house, and my daughter went to her best friend's. And I went and took care of Ian that evening. It was actually the first time he had been given any pain medication or anything. And I just kissed him on the head and said goodnight, and then his brother came into the room to take care of him. So I went and slept on my daughter's bed, and before I fell asleep, I prayed to the angels and just said, please help us. There's no way out at this point. So I fell asleep, and that's when basically 2 angels just came and escorted my soul out of my body and took me to the other side, and what I call heaven. It was the most beautiful place I have ever been. There were rolling, gorgeous hills and colors I've never seen. The colors in heaven, and again, it's so hard to articulate because I feel like we don't even have words to express, but the light of the colors were so dynamic and so multidimensional. I mean, it's unlike, again, I almost feel like here on planet Earth, we live in this kind of flat Stanley. I don't know if you've ever heard of people sitting around this little flat Stanley doll to take on their vacation or whatever, and you take photos with it. And that's kind of what I feel like here on Earth. It's like we're living in this flat Stanley world where the colors are just saturated, but there's no light in the colors here. And then there's just such a wider range of colors. And like I said, there's no words to even express what they are because we don't have them here. And then in the distance, there was this beautiful castle-like structure that they just, next thing I know, we were inside of it. And there were, all of a sudden, I could hear choirs singing, and there were just like all these banners in all the corridors, and there was an announcement, the Grand Mr. Ian Sharp is about to arrive. And as I was approaching down this corridor, it was to the end of this balcony, and I could look down and I saw all these souls coming together. And I can't describe what they really looked like other than I just knew it was Ian's soul family, and that they were so excited, and they're like, oh my gosh, he's coming, he's almost here, he's almost here. Then all of a sudden there was this giant door that started to open. You could almost hear it scraping on the ground, and it just, and everybody turned, all the souls at the same time. Hiss. And just at that moment, he started to walk through, and I saw him, and the amount of unconditional love and peace, and I thought, I never want to leave this place. It's just so amazing. And then right at that moment, there was a knock on my door. Lisa, wake up, wake up. Ian just took his last breath. And it was his brother waking me up to let me know. And at that moment, it was like a trap door opened in heaven, and my soul fell back into my body. And I remember it just this thud back into my physical body. And I bounced out of bed, and I was so actually excited because I saw where he was going. And yet I knew that just that was not like an appropriate response in that moment because my husband just died, and yet I had all this excited feeling. And to top it off, I thought he was going to be going to hell because he hadn't been baptized. I was very religious, and I believed that, because he was unwilling to be baptized, that he literally was going to go to hell. So that made it even more exciting to me that he got to go to heaven. And so I ran down to our bedroom, and his body was laying, but it wasn't him. It was just almost like a shell, and I could just see that his soul was gone and that he had gone to heaven, and I got to witness that. I have never heard of a shared death experience, and I didn't know for years after that until I just randomly read a near-death experience book that talked about near-death experience, and I'm like, oh my God, that's what I experienced, that I wasn't dead. I wasn't, I didn't have a near-death experience, but, it was all so similar, like the colors and the unconditional love and just the excitement and beauty and the cleanliness. That was the biggest thing, is just how clean it is here, in that heavenly realm versus here. And then only recently, after I moved to Maui, and I got involved with the international studies of near-death experiences, did I meet a man who wrote a book about shared death experiences. And that's when I started hearing that they're now starting to study shared death experiences. So I was raised Lutheran, and in fact, it was actually kind of traumatic because I was in a parish where our youth minister ended up molesting a lot of the girls in my confirmation class. And it's so interesting because actually this leads back to my near-death experience, that when he took me to the basement, like, I knew something was going to happen. And so I had the sense to get out before anything did happen. And I attribute that to the fact that I recently found out that I had a near-death experience when I was 2 weeks old. And this was through a guided meditation. And again, it was just so interesting because I was on a guided meditation, not thinking anything of where it was going to take me. But the next thing I know, I remember being born. I was adopted as a baby. And so after I was taken from my birth mother, I was just in a room for 2 weeks basically, where caregivers would come and feed me and take care of me. But I also had colic, so I was crying a lot, and they were having a really hard time consoling me. And so what I saw in this guided meditation is that one of the caregivers picked me up and shook me. And I was like, okay, not only was I taken from my mother, but, I don't have a consistent caregiver, and I'm really uncomfortable in my body. And so I just popped out of my body, and I'm like, I'm out of here. And so in this guided meditation, I witnessed again being in heaven, and I was just surrounded by all these beautiful angels. It's going to again bring me to tears because it was just, they just lovingly said, you have work to do on earth and you need to go back. And so I reluctantly went back into my body, and it was a few days later, but my adopted parents, that's when they picked me up or got me or whatever. And I had the most loving mother that was just so, I even told her as a 4-year-old, like, this was God's plan. You couldn't have babies, but another mommy had to have me so that I could be your babies. So because of that near-death experience, it makes so much sense, because as a child, I saw energies. I saw cowboys and Indians outside my windows at night. I felt aliens come and like put medicine in my mouth and poke my toes with needles when I was a little baby, like a little child. And my mom and dad, of course, didn't believe me. But now that I know about near-death experiences and what happens after you have one, that you do have these sixth sense, really elevated. That makes sense to me why then, like, when I went down to the basement with my minister, I knew that something bad was going to happen. And then when he confessed to doing this to girls, I stepped away from my religion at that point. But then when I got married and had kids, I felt like they really needed that foundation. So I became Episcopalian. And again, I was totally in belief of all the rules that the church said, that you have to be baptized and, that there's heaven and hell and all of this. And interestingly, when I went through the Episcopal church and my husband was dying, I went for counseling. And again, the minister tried to hit on me. So between the two ministers that were, men that that's what I realize now, that religion is just, it's like an organization where men come to power, generally men, and then sometimes take advantage of women. And so between that and then having my own connection with that shared death experience, I'm like, I don't need this anymore. I stepped away from the church. I walked away, and, and I really believe that a lot of that is just for control and a lot of times manipulation of other people. So I am not a fan of organized religion any longer. When people go to the other side, they actually get to witness what they think their heaven is. Because I do think it would be jarring if I had gone to the other side and I was in a Buddhist temple or, like a mosque or something like that. So I do believe, and again, I've interviewed a lot of near-death experiencers, and it seems to me that most people witness what it is that they are kind of anticipating. I don't believe in death. I think we just transition into another realm. And so a lot of times, whatever your current belief is, you just step right through the threshold and you're in the next realm with that same belief system, and then it might unfold from there. But I think when you're first walked through or, again, all the people I've interviewed, it just seems like that's a great way to welcome them in rather than having it be, I am not afraid of death. In fact, I'm looking forward to seeing how this all ends because I've witnessed so many different, deaths throughout my life. And as I'm a hospice volunteer and a death doula, and in fact, a few years ago, after moving to Maui, I was just sitting it was like a Saturday morning with my phone, just looking out. All of a sudden, I get an alert saying, incoming missile from North Korea. This is not a test. This is actually happening. Take cover. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I had no idea this is how it was gonna end. I'm actually really excited. I actually was ready to get in my car and go to the beach and say, bring it on, because I didn't, if I'm gonna go that way, I want to go quick. I don't want to have the radiation poisoning or whatever after the fact. And meanwhile, I know all the islands, just people were driving off the road and freaking out about the whole thing. But I've really, again, from interviewing near-death experiencers, every one of them says, before impact in a car accident, or if they were falling or freezing to death or whatever their circumstances was, their soul pops out before the impact, so they don't feel the pain. They don't experience that. And so I trust that that'll happen with me too. So am I doing the work that I'm here to do? I feel like I'm leaning in closer and closer. Part of it is literally sharing my experiences with people just to help them, whatever they're going through. A lot of times I get feedback from people that it really helps to know that these stories exist and can help them. So I'm leaning into being an eternal love and abundance coach, which is helping people as they are on their journey here on earth. And if that's connecting with their passed away loved ones, if it's, figuring out why they're stuck in life. I've had so many experiences through these shared death experiences and talking about near-death experiences and cultivating relationships on the other side. And I call him my heavenly husband. He's been helping me for 20 years. And he talks to me, he guides me, he helps me. My mom is the same way. Ram Das, who's a spiritual leader here on Maui, I had a shared death experience with him, and he's guiding me at all times. So I am here to now help people literally connect with their loved ones and cultivate that relationship. So it's not over when they die. It's just a new experience of a relationship with their soul. And it's super exciting, it's super fun. And yeah, I feel like I'm on my path. We all fall when the looks in our eyes, staring lost on the skyline. We all fall when the looks in our eyes.